Is using intention detrimental within your Qigong practice? That is going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life. Alright, so if you've been following the channel lately, you'll know that this is actually the third video in a series. It's probably third and last. You never know, I might pick up another topic related to this I might talk about as well, but it's probably the third and last one. The first of those videos was about the general topic of, is too much of something being bad, does that mean that that thing is inherently bad? So you might want to watch this video first. I think you'll understand things well enough just from this video, but you might also want to look back at that one for a bit of general context around this topic. I talk through a series of different examples around this to hopefully make it really practical and really understandable, and probably some of those specific examples might be quite interesting to you maybe. So you might want to check that one. And then also the previous one to this was about sensation, physical sensation in your Qigong practice, and whether paying attention to that sensation is a bad thing in your practice or not. So I'll put the link to both of those previous vlogs in the description below. You might want to check them out. Anyway, on to the topic of this one, intention within Qigong practice. Is that a bad thing to use intention? Now, what inspired me to talk about this specific topic is I recently saw someone talking about this and saying, yeah, basically that using intention is not good in your Qigong practice and it'll make your energy stagnate and, all this sort of thing. And there's a certain way that, or a certain area of application where that could be true, or it could be true for some people. But as you'll see as I talk through this topic, it's by no means true for all people or even most people. So I'm going to try to present a balanced view of this topic, of the use of intention and how it can be harmful, because it can be. Too much intention can be harmful, but how it can also be really, really good, and I would go beyond good to say actually essential. The key is having it in the right balance. Too much can be harmful, not enough can also be harmful. We want to apply this in a healthy way that facilitates healthy flow of our energy. That's what we want in our Qigong practice. So first, let's look at how intention can be harmful, and I think I have probably talked about this previously. I'm sure I have in one of the vlogs, probably in one of the articles, how excessive use of intention can be harmful. It can misdirect aspects of our practice. One of the extreme examples of this is people who go about their Qigong practice seeking out some kind of superpower. They think that by doing Qigong, they're going to gain superpowers, and it really is. It's like they're wanting to obtain power, which fundamentally, if you look into that, probably means they're coming from a fundamentally unhealthy place with their ego, with their sense of identity, that they feel the need to seek something like that out. So yeah, already coming from an imbalanced position. And then in having that really strong intention, they will often ignore all the important things like what's going on in their body and how they're responding, because they're so intent on this pursuit of power, of superpowers, that they'll disregard little indicators that things are going wrong and causing them harm, and maybe what they're doing isn't good. And that intention has a very real effect on our energy. Within our Qigong practice, you've heard me talk about this a lot, I'm sure. There are three main tools that are present within all our Qigong practices to a greater or lesser extent, and that is the mind, the body, and the breath. And we use these together to connect to our energy and direct it and harmonize it and all these sorts of things. And each of them are important, each of them are useful, each of them has a role to play. Some Qigong practices focus much more on one tool than another. So some focus very much on the mind. They're more meditative. They are more intention focused. The body and the breath will still have a role to play, but it's the mind that's the primary driver. Other practices are more focused on using the body. They use movements and postures and things like that to create a certain stimulus within the body and affect the energy in that way. Others focus very much on the breath. They use specific breathing patterns and practices to have an effect on the body and the energy. But they're all connected. When we do a practice that's focused on the breath, it's clearly affecting the body and it's clearly affecting the mind. The mind is playing a role, the body's playing a role, and so on. They're always interconnected. And many practices are really using all three of these together in a very balanced way. So there's a whole range of different Qigong practices. And it's very clear if you have some experience with this range of different Qigong practices, that our mind has a very clear influence on what happens with our energy. If you don't have a lot of experience with Qigong practice, maybe you're not aware of this. Maybe you haven't noticed yet if you're a complete beginner. But as you delve into it, it's like, yeah, mind really has a big effect on what goes on within the body and therefore the energy as well. And so someone who has a really strong intention, and they're not just seeking after health and harmony and balance, right? They're seeking after a superpower. That can then force their energy to flow in ways that are unhealthy for them. Force it to take on characteristics that are unhealthy for them. Can lead it to become stagnant, blocked. Absolutely. That too strong use of intention can be very, very harmful. That being the extreme, the seeking after superpowers. Even in a more minor way, use of intention can cause problems because, that, really strong intention seeking after superpower, that's a big push from the mind, in that aspect of directing the energy. Even a more gentle use of intention, if it's done persistently, like a strong intention, a strong stimulus can cause harm in a relatively short amount of time. A weaker, more gentle stimulus can still cause harm. It's just generally going to take longer. And because it's gentle, there's a good chance that you'll just avoid it completely, right? It's just much less likely. But even a gentle stimulus, if it's the wrong type of stimulus, it's unhealthy, it can cause harm just over a longer period of time. And so similarly with our intention, and it's not necessarily that we're chasing after superpowers, but we just have a wrong idea about something. Like, for example, super simple example, maybe nuanced if you don't have a good understanding of this sort of stuff already. But if you have a wrong idea about where one of the meridians flows in your body, and you persistently, with your intention, direct energy to flow where you think it should flow rather than where it actually should flow, guess what? You can actually cause the energy to start to shift, to flow where your intention is telling it to flow, rather than where it actually should. That's going to cause harm. Yeah? That's actually a pretty good example, I think, of how it can cause harm, because it then ties in with how it can be healthy as well, or how we can find a healthy balance in using intention. So I'm going to leave that one. I'm going to come back to it. I'll come back to that example and say, well, if having the wrong intention, even if it's a gentle intention, can cause harm, can cause energy to stagnate and take on unhealthy characteristics and so on, we want to avoid that. We want to avoid having any incorrect intentions. Well, that's true. But, we're human. We're going to make mistakes, right? So how can we approach this in a healthy way? We'll come back to that later in terms of finding balance. For now, I'm going to talk about why intention is necessary. It's actually essential to some degree. So it's not certainly not purely harmful, purely bad. It's essential. That implies that having it in the right amount is therefore healthy. There's an old saying I think I've quoted it on this channel before. It's a good one. It's one that stuck with me when I first heard it, and so like it comes back, from time to time. And that is, so when I first heard this saying, this quote, it was said that it came from Eleanor Roosevelt. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea. It could be true though, or it could have come from somewhere else and someone just attributed it to Eleanor Roosevelt to make it sound cool. But the saying is that only dead fish swim with the current all the time, or go with the current all the time. And so it's talking about the fact that as a living being, if all you do is get pushed around by what's happening around you, you're not really alive, because that's just going to take you all sorts of places, and eventually it's going to run you into something that could hurt or injure you or kill you or take you where is really not healthy for you to go. Living things, we actually choose our own course, at least some of the time. We can go with the flow sometimes, maybe even a lot of the time, but sometimes we need to go against the flow or across the flow, across the current. You think of a fish living in a river. If all that fish does is go with the flow all the time, a freshwater fish generally can't live in salt water. So many freshwater rivers, if that fish goes with that river all the time, it's going to end up in the sea, it's going to die. At some point it needs to turn around and swim against the current. Same thing in terms of reproducing. There are certain fish, and some of these can actually live in freshwater and salt water, but in order for them to reproduce, they might spend time out in the ocean where it's salty and they come back into the freshwater rivers. In order to reproduce, they have to go to the right spot where the other fish are. I'm talking about salmon in particular here. It probably applies to other fish as well. They need to go to the right spot. They've got to swim against the current to go there in order to reproduce, in order to continue their cycle of life. But everything in life, at some point, it's not just about going with the flow. It's about choosing your direction, finding your way to navigate, sometimes with the current, sometimes against the current, sometimes across the current, to go where you want to in life. Now, you could take an extremely philosophical view and go like, yeah, I just always do whatever comes naturally. But that, in a hypothetical world, could that work? Some hypothetical world could that be maybe your definition of following the Tao, following the path of nature, just always doing whatever comes most easily, just maybe. But I don't think that really is the path of nature. That's the point, though. You can come up with some hypothetical of like, yeah, always doing the easiest thing. Nature will guide you to the best thing. But that's not actually how nature works. In nature, every living thing chooses its path to some degree. And we do as humans, absolutely. Now, that means having an intention, some kind of intention of where you want to go, what you want to achieve. Now, sometimes that intention is just so naturally there, or perhaps implicit in what you're doing, what you're choosing, that you don't think of it as specifically an intention, but it is. It's still an intention. It's just like at a low, subtle level. So even doing some type of Qigong practice at all requires some kind of intention. There's some kind of intention implicit within that. And that might be different for different people. Some people might have an intention of just discovering something new. Someone might have an intention of exploring Chinese philosophy and culture. Someone might have an intention of improving their health. It might be really general. They might have no idea specifically how their health is going to improve or anything like that, but it's like, yeah, they're doing the Qigong practice because they have a general intention of that. For other people, the intention might be more specific. They might have an intention of improving their health in a specific way, in which case that's going to shape their practice. And it can shape. I'll stick with that example actually for a little while, because it can draw a few useful things out of that, because there's different ways that it can shape their practice. They may actually just continue to do the same practice as someone else with a different intention. They might do exactly the same practice, in terms of movements or methodology or meditation or breathing, whatever it is, they might do the same practice. But subtly in the background, because they have that intention of improving a specific aspect of their health, that will naturally shape what goes on for them within that practice. The mind, again, it does have a clear and direct effect on our energy and what goes on within our body. Having that intention will then make subtle changes to our blood flow, the tension in our body, the function of the organs, the activity of the nerves, the release of hormones, as our body, our mind, our system tries, and again, it can be a very gentle effort, it doesn't have to be a strong, focused effort, but tries to go in the direction of that intention. That can change the outcome, having that intention, even if it's a very gentle intention, to make the benefit more specific to what that person needs. So having this type of intention is really, really helpful. In another way, having that intention maybe of helping with a specific health issue, it might have a more direct and obvious effect on your practice. It might lead you to doing a specific sort of practice and not another one, or to do more of a particular type of practice, because you know or have some understanding that that practice is likely to do things that are helpful for your health condition, or maybe someone has given you some advice that those particular practices are going to be helpful for you for that health condition. And so that intention then shapes the practice in really obvious ways. And again, that's going to have an effect if you've selected the right practices. That's going to do things that are going to specifically be helpful to you. So yeah, that intention is healthy. It's really healthy. All right. I could go on, I think, about the healthy use of intention and why it's healthy, why it's even essential. Because with no intention, you don't go anywhere. Like, you'd just, I don't know, you'd become mindless. You'd just, you know. Again, you could maybe come up with some hypothetical description of a reality that's not a real reality, where you might say that, all you need to do is observe. But what do you choose to observe? What do you choose to observe? There's an intention behind that. And also, there needs to be an acknowledgement and understanding that in observing, we actually change the thing observed. This is a well understood thing from the world of physics, and I think from other practices as well. Meditation, for one. You start to understand, by observing, just the act of observing starts to make changes. So none of us are purely passive. None of us just observe and nothing else, right? That naturally there is intention behind observation even. It's essential. It has to be there. You can't avoid it being there. So the question is not, is intention good or bad? It's, what's the healthy way to use intention? How do you find a healthy balance? And that healthy balance will actually be different for different people in different circumstances. Sometimes it will be healthy to use intention in a stronger, more precise way. And other times that same level of intention may not be healthy for someone, and they actually need to have a more gentle intention as part of their practice. I'll go back to working with meridians now, that example I mentioned earlier, and having an intention and how that can actually change the flow of a meridian in either an unhealthy or a healthy way, actually, because quite naturally, actually, sometimes the flow of energy in meridians can get pushed out of their path by other things in our life. It's not necessarily a direct intention of it. Strong emotions, physical injury, some types of illness and so on can affect our body to such a degree that affects the pathway of the flow of the meridian. And having the right intention can help get it back into its healthy pathway of flow. That's a good thing. But equally, having an incorrect understanding leading to an intention, excuse me, which drives the energy in an incorrect pathway, that can move it out of its healthy pathway. That can cause harm, stagnancy, so on. Classic one of these is just focusing on trying to flow the energy in the wrong direction. But it can also just be the wrong specific location of movement as well. So what do we want to do here? Given that we can't actually avoid having intention, understanding that too much intention is harmful, but the right amount is really helpful, or applied in the right way it's helpful. How can we work to use that intention in a healthy way? It's about balancing observation and intention. So not using any intention too strongly until we have enough awareness to understand what's already happening and also what's then happening as a result of that intention, so that we can have an awareness of it. And often these things develop together. So balance, observation, intention, observation, intention. So rather than just go like, right, I have this idea of where the meridian is and trying to push the energy through it, and we aim to discover where the energy flow is, because most people aren't all that aware of them to begin with, by observing. And we're probably going to use a map of where those meridians are. This is something that's been studied by many people over a long period of time. And so there are maps, meridian charts. So we use this as a starting point to observe. And then we also use our intention to connect to that energy, and maybe by creating a stronger flow through those meridians, there's more to observe, right? And so it becomes easier to connect to it, to notice it. So we use some intention, but we want that to be gentle to begin with. We don't want it to be too strong, because we might push it in the wrong direction, but a gentle intention to increase the flow of energy, and then observe, see what we can notice. And maybe a little bit more, observe, see what we can notice. And then when we actually start to have an understanding and awareness of where the energy is flowing, now we can work with it in even richer ways. Is the flow, does it match up with the maps, the charts of where they flow? Even if it does match up, or doesn't, in terms of our sense, our understanding of the tissues of our body, our own internal sense, is it flowing in the healthiest pathway for it? We might have a sense that it's like, actually it's not quite right. And most of the time, just, because our bodies function naturally, simply by increasing the flow, being aware of it, naturally it will tend to want to self-correct. Most of the time it doesn't really take a strong intention to correct that, but a gentle intention of bringing your awareness to that, and then increasing the flow of energy, again using intention to some degree, is going to help that process of then allowing the meridian to self-correct. Now sometimes if there has been some major type of trauma or something that has diverted that flow of energy, it's going to take a more specific intention often, or at least a more specific intention is going to be useful to correct that more quickly, more easily. That then also requires a higher level of awareness to do that well, in a way that you can have confidence that you're going to be helping rather than harming. But we develop this over time, balancing observation with intention, not letting our intention get away from us, not letting it get away from our level of awareness of what we've observed and understood, but yet still using intention, using it in a healthy, balanced way. All right, again, there's probably a bunch of other examples we could talk about, but hopefully this is useful to someone, maybe to several people, to get both sides of this topic, to understand that, excessive intention can be harmful. In fact, that is the main way that I see people harming themselves with Qigong practice. It's those people who go chasing after superpowers, and they, just get fixated and intent, and they just push their energy in ways that aren't healthy for them. It's the main way I see people harming themselves. So it's true, that can be harmful. But at the same time, intention is so valuable. You can't actually escape from using it. There will always be some intention behind what you do. And recognizing how you can use that in a healthy way, in a balanced way, that matches and balances with your observation, with your growing awareness, growing understanding, to actively live your life, actively direct your energy in a way that's healthy, that's natural, that brings you the most vitality, well-being, and so on. Okay, again, hopefully that's useful. If you've enjoyed the vlog, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things. And I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.